I'm going to the cloud.
All right, we recording?
We're recording. What's up, Tilly?
Hey, Alma.
So, barely recognize you. Anything you want to tell our dear audience?
It's like a lot of times when you're writing a paper in school or anywhere really, they say, don't tell, show. So I think I'm showing,
Oh
you
my
know?
goodness. Things that happen in between podcast episodes.
Yeah. It had to happen at some point.
Well, there you go. At least I'm getting used to it. I'm still getting used to it, I must confess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've had a fun week and a half or so since the first episode was released out into the wild.
Yeah.
I've gotten a lot of interesting feedback, comments. What about you?
Yeah. I mean, so far only positive, but I tend to both be very thankful that people have actually been listening, and also I kind of want to make a bunch of episodes before I can really internalize any serious kind of feedback, only because we're so new at this. But yeah, it's been awesome that people are actually generous enough to listen
Yes.
and
Yes.
participate or participate in some way. Because it's a funny thing. I feel like someone who listens, even though like they're listening, but like they're participating in what we're doing. Because right?
Yeah. One of the, and I would say a piece of feedback that I'd like to internalize, even though it's at this early stage, is something that you and I like decided that we really wanted, which was, so a few people have told me it's like sitting in on a conversation with the two of you. And we know it's not always going to be the two of us. Back today, it's not going to be just the two of us. But the fact that something that they really liked is being able to, listen to our conversation, feel like they're there with us. And so I get what you're saying about participation. And I hope that that is something that is, kind of part of our essence that will keep up.
Yeah, absolutely. How you doing in general? What's up?
Oh, in general, Chicago weather is sucking. I'm so mad at it. I'm so mad. My Instagram like 10 a.m. post was just a black screen, and then white letters like little snowflakes are falling outside of my window right now. It is October 17th. October. And I was very angry, really, Chicago. So Monday and Tuesday were bad. Today was pretty cold. But then, hey, Sunday is going to be like 78 degrees and sunny. So how are you not supposed to get sick in this crazy, just insane weather? So I'm sick. Long story short, not super sick, a little sick. I got my mint tea right here. But yeah, I'm a little, I'm not super, I have a little head cold.
I have some tea.
But what are you drinking?
I'm drinking throat coat tea.
I should be drinking that. That's a smart idea. I don't have that here.
Good.
Are you feeling sick?
No.
With your throat? Oh, okay.
No, but you know, I've been pretty good. I drink a lot of tea. I drink tea pretty much every day, every evening.
And so your coffee and tea, you go both ways.
Yeah. I drink about 1 cup of coffee a day though. Not much more than that. Not even, I mean, sometimes a little bit more, but yeah, I just realized, at some point I realized it was a bit too much and I was having a hard time going to sleep. So yeah, 1 cup of coffee in the morning, hopefully a good cup, although lately I have not been drinking great coffee. And and then tea. I mean, especially my time living in Turkey has made me drink a lot of tea. Turks, if I can generalize, I think I can, drink a lot of tea, a lot of tea.
Well, you were there for 3 years, right?
2 years.
2. Okay. That's enough to generalize.
Yeah. So we have a guest on today, which I'm really excited about.
Yes, but okay, so before we bring on this guest, so there was a thing. Well, this guest is kind of part of an answer. So you brought this up to me on the phone, right?
I did.
And I think you're right about this. And the thing is that last week we ended the podcast saying, or the first episode, right? we ended the podcast saying like, okay, we didn't get to all of the audios, the voice recordings that we wanted to about this question, what is LOC? And so
right, LOC being learning and organizational change.
Thank you. Yes,
right.
yes. And so, okay, so the transparent truth is that 2 of the audios that were sent to us are from incredible people. One is Elena Corban and the other is Chels Watkins. But these 2 people really took the assignment so seriously, and they sent us long voice notes, and nor you nor I have the audio editing capabilities to know how to get like a little snippet out and be able to share that. So we suck in that regard.
Ooh, I would say we don't yet. I would say we don't
We
yet.
don't yet. So we do suck right now.
Growth mindset.
Always.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you have to suck first, and we really suck at that. Like we don't have those capabilities, and we'll get them. So, but not for tonight's episode, unfortunately. I did tell Elena this, and she said that it's okay and that we could invite her on the show one day.
Exactly. No, we figured we'd do better than just play their audio, which is awesome that both of them sent in some really solid audio. But we figured
they really did.
We figured it'd be nice to just hear directly from Chels and from Elena.
Yeah, so tonight's not Elena, so it must be the other person. Is there another person in the studio? Unmute.
I was like, how can I come in with an entrance?
That was incredible. Okay, for our listeners, those who are on Spotify.
So perfect.
Chels Watkins just came into the room with 2 thumbs up, not 1, but 2. And here they are, Chels Watkins. Welcome to the Tuli and Alma podcast for the meantime, while we find a name.
I'm excited.
How you doing?
I'm great. I'm just happy to be here. Happy to be in conversation with the 2 of you. It's amazing. You guys are great.
Oh.
And we're both in Chicago right now. I'm actually, I guess I should have said, I'm coming to you live from my in-laws' basement in Chicago, Illinois. And Alma, of course, you're on the other side of the city, but also Chicago. Chels, where are you physically at the moment?
I'm physically in North Berkeley, California.
North Berkeley.
I really like Berkeley, California.
Berkeley's pretty dope. Yeah.
I don't know Berkeley well enough to know what North Berkeley means, but
I didn't need to say North.
It's good.
Kind of came out.
But the Bay Area peeps, they'll appreciate that.
They'll get it.
Know exactly.
Yeah. The demographic. It's a small city, but age-wise, the demographic substantially increases as you enter the north side. So, which means I get to walk around as like a young buck in the neighborhood.
Oh, so
Just
smart.
like, I know.
Oh,
That's
how to feel younger with Chels Watkins. Step 1.
Podcast coming out.
So, Chels, I know that you graduated from the same program that Alma and I are part of, Northwestern University's Masters in Learning and Organizational Change. And you graduated, was it when, in this past June or before, or a year ago? When was it?
Oh, June.
Yeah, this year. In March, a week before I got married.
Congrats.
Thanks. Which is a hell of a month.
Yeah. That month you presented your capstone, got married.
Yeah, finished school.
Graduated. Wow.
Started work like a week after that. It was just a whirlwind.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Good whirlwind, but a whirlwind.
That's amazing. Yeah, and what else? I guess, like, who is Chels Watkins? Would you mind introducing yourselves to the good folks? All of the hundreds of thousands of listeners.
Our 100 colleagues who will watch this. Which is Northwestern paying you guys for
We're working on it. We're working on it. If you're listening.
We are so working on it.
Amazing. Who is Chels? That was a question, right?
Yes.
Who is Chels? Chels is a big weirdo. I'll start with that. I am someone who, loves friends and family, loves being outdoors. I love change and new things. I love being challenged. Yeah, I'm just really weird. I have like a big family and we're all like really weird and really good dancers. And that's like that's like our family motto. And yeah,
We're weird, but we dance. Is that the motto?
we're weird, but we dance. So people like us. Yeah, it's kind of funny.
That's great.
Yeah, I like having a lot of fun. I like having really hard conversations, and like challenging my own and other people's like positions and like assumptions and ideas, all in like the pursuit of that like growth mindset. And yeah, I have some like key people in my life who I'm able to do that with. My brother being one, he's the one about to have his first kid right now as we speak.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah, really cool. So yeah, I just am always learning. That's kind of all I'm about, is like learning and trying to like, have an impact on the people around me, and yeah, trying to make a difference.
Oh.
It sounds
So that's great. Okay, I'm sure Tuli has a bunch of other little questions, but I have a question about change. So so you say you like change. There was an event recently with a bunch of people who work in change and change management types of things, right? And the facilitators did something really interesting. They divided up the room, and then they put, okay, do you prefer trying to change something about yourself, like having to go through a personal change, or working in an organization to help other people go through change? And of course, you'd think like, we're all change professionals. Of course, we like changing ourselves. Oh my gosh, there were like 5 people on that site. So, which is fascinating, because people who don't like to change themselves often work in change things, in change professions, right? So, Chels Watkins, do you actually like change for yourself, and you yourself going through a change process? Dun, dun, dun.
it's funny because I think those two things are really related. Like, I don't know if they're on a binary. Because I think you have to be willing to change yourself to inspire or to like complete change in other contexts. But I think, I mean, I really love personal development, I have to admit. Like, I really like understanding myself and understanding where my like quirks come from, like when I'm triggered, like where the hell is that coming from? Are we allowed to curse on this?
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's
oh wait, did you just say no, Alma?
I was playing though. I was like, no. No, of course you can.
Sorry,
Northwestern
Ryan.
is not paying us.
Sorry, Ryan Smerick, if you're listening.
Ryan will hate that. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, I think personal change is super hard, and that's probably why we don't like doing it. Like, I face my own battles of like trying to understand why I did something, why I'm reacting to something in a certain way, why I like sometimes I'm not disciplined around things that I want to achieve. So it's not about like wanting to change myself, it's wanting to understand myself so I can like navigate my life and like achieve the things I want to achieve, while like not, like hammering myself into the ground, like you need to change, like you're not good enough in this way. So it's like I just mostly like seek to understand so that I can navigate myself
better. That's cool.
Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. Alma, you just said something that I think 9 out of 10 people that I talk to that are not part of like the MSLOC community, which our graduate program, or kind of in this world of people who are doing a certain kind of consulting, or work in a certain kind of HR environment, or even work in a certain kind of company. They have no idea what this notion of change management means. And to be honest, I'm nearly done, and I'll be graduating in a month or two from our program, which is called Learning and Organizational Change. And I'm not even sure if I have like a very wonderful and succinct way of explaining to people. I always say to people, well, imagine, 2 companies merged together. That's a change. Or I start giving examples of like changes, that happen. But like, I'm not even sure if I'm like great at explaining what that means. So I don't know, either like Chels, do you have a good way of like explaining that to people? Like, what is change? What is, like, you said you like change. What is that? What is change? Like, and I mean, I know what changing means. Like, you could change something or you could change yourself. But like, what is like the field of change?
Yeah. I mean, I get why it's so hard to explain or why it's so hard to wrap our heads around, because I think change is everywhere. Like, it's funny to call it change management, because maybe for like an average person at an organization, they're like, everything, like a bunch of stuff changes for me every day. And like,
right.
So I think that it's ubiquitous, and people manage like their own day-to-day change, like in their all sorts of contexts of their life. But when we talk about change management as a field, I think it's like really explicit and intentional management of like very large structured change. And so it's all about like, when you're going through a transition that you can spot that, is integral for your life, for your organization, going from one like tool to another and like transitioning an entire team to do that. Like, I think that a lot of people underestimate the effort and like the prep and the follow through that needs to happen to actually successfully migrate that change. And that's where I think change management lives, is like all of the psychology, all of the steps, all of the things that need to happen to get people to adopt something that they're extremely uncomfortable with, that might make them feel incompetent, that might make their productivity slump. And if their identity is connected to their productivity, then they feel like trash. And like all those things make people really resistant to like wanting to switch to something, even like the smallest thing, and then not even mention like M&A, like you mentioned, or organizational redesigns or new leadership. Like, those are things I think we really underestimate the need for like a management of that transition, so that folks can like actually get there without crashing and burning individually, or without the change itself crashing and burning.
Yeah, you've used a really important word, transition, right? Were you in, have you read that book, Managing Transitions? You familiar with that book?
Bridges, right? Yeah.
Yes, the Bridges one. Tuli, are you familiar with that book?
I am.
Oh yeah, you are, right. Okay, cool.
Yeah. It's very good. And Chels, thank you for that. That was awesome. I'm gonna re-listen to that and no, that was such a good way to put it. And I think you're right. And I also wonder if we underestimate how, like, when it comes to like personal change, how much like the follow through and the intention and all that stuff that you just mentioned about systems wide change and like trying to change like a large group of people can also sometimes be true when we're trying to change something personal about our own lives.
Yeah.
Like I remember in one of our classes, it was the one that Dory I think it's 421.
441.
441. Yeah. All our classes have
numbers
and I don't know. And the titles are usually very long, and those who remember, and Alma typically though remembers all the names. So what was the name of 441?
This is a bald-faced lie.
It is. I don't know. Maybe Chels, did you take that class?
I don't even remember what the numbers of the classes were anymore. So Alma's probably right. Alma's definitely right, actually.
I think we're in it together, but anyways, it was about change.
Yeah,
but change?
No, that's 442. I'm taking that now. Yeah. But one of the things we did, so like we were talking a lot about changes in the context of an organization, right? In the context of trying to change from one tool to another, or an M&A or that stuff. But simultaneously, we also each kept these change journals where we were trying to do some sort of personal change, and kind of thinking about like how personal change and organizational change are related is really interesting.
It is.
Yeah. And I think that I was thinking, Alma, back to your original question of like, what side would you choose in that room? Whether like, would you want to face personal change or like push a change in an organization? And I think one of the biggest challenges with personal transformation is it's really hard to be your own change manager. Like, trying to be objective about, because resistance is very natural in change in all contexts. And it's a wonderful source of data as a change manager, right? to like hear why people are feeling resistant to something. But to do that for yourself is like really challenging, right? Is to be like shifting, and I need to be able to dig deep and figure out why, but that involves like self-analyzing, which is hard for people. So I think, yeah, they're definitely related, and I can see the challenges of like, even if you're an excellent change manager, in organizational context, like it doesn't necessarily translate to being great personally.
And it's often easier the other way around, because like you said, having people work with you, and having like in a big organization, there might be people working on the communication strategy, and there might be in like a big structured change that you're talking about, right? And there's people thinking about, okay, what training are we going to give? How are we going to give support? What are the ways that we're going to be there for when people are feeling frustrated with this transition? Whereas when it's yourself, like maybe you find a friend who will help you exercise or whatever that little personal change is. But at any moment you could bail.
and might not know why, right?
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's very complete. What were you going to say, Tuli?
Well, no, well, I was gonna ask a philosophical question, but I don't know that we should go there just yet, even though I kind of want to. I'm interested to hear your opinion. But Chels, do you is this the kind of stuff that you think about in the context of your current role at work, or not necessarily?
Well, what's a little bit, it's definitely related. And I think that I'm not necessarily working on explicit change management right now. But I think because of what I said earlier, that change is like a constant in organizational life, that it's something that everyone needs to like be aware of or think about. So I am thinking about it in the context of my work, but even though I'm not necessarily like managing like a change manager explicitly right now.
Yeah. And we should say that you work as a consultant in what kind of space? Like what's your title? I'm putting like air quotes because I don't know, for some people their title is very descriptive of like what they do and it means a lot, and for some people not, so take that as you wish.
Yeah, for sure. I work for an amazing firm called Propeller Consulting here in the Bay Area, and I have like, actually one of the reasons I was attracted to them was they allow that's my first consulting role, like formal consulting role, and so they allow folks to enter as generalists, like just as like consultant is the title, where like a lot of other firms want you to come in as like a specific type of consultant. And what's wonderful for me about that is that I love change. Like maybe loving change is a funny way to put it, but I love novelty. Like I love learning new things. I tend not to go like really, really deep. Like, I don't know if I could do a PhD, for instance. Like I love going like surface level on a bunch of stuff. And what's great about Propeller is that they have 4 practice areas that I can consult across all of them to a certain extent. And so like right now, my client work is sitting in the people, it's a vertical called People and Change. It's one of our practices. So it does involve change, even though like the nitty gritty of my work isn't necessarily managing change. But I'm also a member of our Experience Design initiative, which is all about like design and experience design. And doing that for organizations. And so I think it's cool. So I love that I can like stretch across. I can go to the other ones, which is like tech transformation and data and analytics. I'm doing a lot of data work right now. So yeah, it's a mix of a lot of those things, but not explicit. And change touches all of that because change is life. But not necessarily like explicitly like managing change.
So you've said another key word there. Thank you for giving us that context, which is design, right? So full transparency with everyone, the hundreds of thousands of people listening, right? She almost spilled her water.
Yeah.
I got
That's
it.
funny.
That was good. Okay. No, but one of the main topics that we obviously we want to get to know Chels, and hopefully everyone listening is more interested in getting to know you. But we also wanted to talk about this specific topic, which is kind of, I guess it's like a little bit of design thinking and continuous discovery mixed with kind of an agile mindset.
Whoa, you just said a lot of terms.
I know. That's okay. That's what we have Chels for, because Chels is going to explain. Okay, bye. So, change and your work right now in the context of what you've just studied. So I just threw out 3 terms
Mhm.
that the idea isn't just to go with those terms, but actually, discuss them so that they're not just terms, so that they're not just jargon. So I said design thinking, and then I said continuous discovery,
Mhm.
and then agile mindset. So could you share with us kind of what you're doing and what those 3 things are and what you're doing with work right now that involves those 3?
Yeah.
Whoa. 1 second. I'm sorry. And when you were saying, Alma, when you, I think what you started saying before is that you and Chels were doing some of this kind of work in the context of the DOEC certificate. Is that right?
I didn't say that, but yes,
Okay.
yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. I should say that.
Got it. So,
Yes.
and what is the DOEC certificate? That's off.
Oh, it's the Designing for Organizational Effectiveness certificate. So yeah, that is, I didn't mention that because I didn't want to use more terms. But yeah, we just studied that, and it was 4 quarters, 4 classes, 4 quarters that we went through at different times, actually,
Yeah.
focused on different methods and ways that you can approach organizational effectiveness, how to make organizations more effective, and how you
Yeah.
can design that.
Yeah. No, amazing. So and Chels, I'm wondering if, all those terms that Alma threw at you, which are all cool, and I think I
There.
but I'm wondering if you could start in some way by talking about design, because for me, this was one of those things that was like a little bit new. Like I know for people that maybe are like in a certain environment, like that's normal to them, but I always thought as design, like, I don't know, I'm designing something physical, like a
Yeah.
graphic designer or something like that,
Mhm.
or like the design of my clothing or something like that. So yeah, I don't know. I wonder if you could talk about design and then all that other stuff, or however you want to, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, design is a fascinating concept because, like you said, Tuli, I think in our broader culture, it's held up as this, like, yeah, we think of Apple, we think of Steve Jobs, we think of very product-based design. But I think what's fascinating and what folks, if they start to look for it, might notice is that design is like everywhere, like invisible design. Whether that's, I mean, particularly if we want to focus on organizational contexts, we could talk about like the architecture of data. We could talk like, which might be invisible to like a user inside the organization or a customer. But then also just like how, like even the way that people interact with each other can be designed, whether that's like through the layout of an office or just like the operating cadence of an organization. So like as an example, if you think about like strategic planning cycles, like strategic planning is usually designed in a way that matches the organization and what they want to accomplish. And the way that, the cadence at which that happens is all designed by someone, and like how to think about it, when to bring in certain people, when decisions need to be made, when the deadlines are, and then especially in organizations, like process design, just like the process by which tasks move from one person to the next, one team to the next. For experience design for customers, it's how customers move through an organization, what touch points, like when do they interact with an organization, when do they want to be interacting with the organization, how many systems does the customer have to go through and touch in order to get what they want from us. And so, I mean, it's interesting, and there's like really cool podcasts like 99% Invisible and a lot of podcasts that think about and talk about like kind of invisible design in our society, and how it drastically impacts our life. The political system, laws, the way that our healthcare system works, a lot of things that we can't necessarily see, but that we're all designed to get specific outcomes, kind of for better or worse.
So would you say, is it, from listening to you, is it fair to say that design is just an intentional making of something? Or how do you define design?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about design is also that it can have a lot of unintended consequences as well. So yeah, and the way I was describing it, I was like boxing it as something like intentional that someone was in control of, but sometimes a design
It's not.
there that evolved or was built on top of each other and is clunky, or they're just like wasn't thought out, like, you know, the dangers of like the downsides of social media and the way that information can spread via algorithms. Like, you know, Facebook claims that they didn't think about that when they were designing Facebook, right? So that's like an unintended consequence that they didn't design, but it was an output or an outcome of the design itself.
Yeah. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we have you here, because that was
Yes.
no, that was such a fantastic
Hair
that
flick.
was such a fantastic answer. What's that?
It was. Oh, Chels did a little hair flick
Oh,
in
nice.
my camera. So
I have this like thing going right here, so I'm really
I
trying to
like
do
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
so how has your thinking and applying like design in your workspace changed in the last year or two? What are you doing
Yeah.
differently after the designing for org effectiveness certificate?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a few things. There's like, so something I'm really intrigued by and that we've talked about is like the concept of design justice, which I think that a lot of folks potentially listening might have different interpretations, or, you know, and there's no wrong answer, I don't think necessarily, but my exposure has been through an organization called the Design Justice Network that has like a set of principles by which they attempt to, you know, transmute design. And so I think like my interpretation of design is transformed in two ways. One is about the justice aspect of it, which is that, you know, like Tuli said, that we tend to hold justice design up on like a pedestal, and we kind of pretend like only a few people are like born with a skill set to design something amazing. And like in Silicon Valley, like designers are revered. And I think like what design justice does is we say like, we need to break down that hierarchy, because first of all, people design their like in their day-to-day life every day. People, like everyone is technically a designer if you think about it. And so design justice is all about like breaking down those barriers, because there's like a patriarchal air to design in the way that we think about it today, where it's like this elite designer knows their audience, knows what their customers want, what a community wants, and they're going to like pop out this gorgeous design that's going to fix everyone's problems. And design justice is about like acknowledging the fact that like designers, like the community needs or user needs, customer needs should come above any kind of designer intentions, to kind of strip away that like patriarchal or like vibe, that we should be empowering users and community members with tools to help design for themselves, or to help continue on a design once the designer leaves, to like maintain it over time. We should be like never pretending that a designer could fully understand the lived experiences of the people they're trying to assist. And so like really centering, and this is where like human-centered design kind of touches it, where it's like really centering the voices of the people who are going to be impacted by the outcomes of the design process, and their voices, and not trying to extrapolate or interpret. It's like use their quotes, like put them in a meeting and help them explain to other stakeholders like where they're coming from. And like really it's about seeing the designer as a facilitator almost more than a designer itself. You're facilitating a process to try and get to an outcome. You're not like bestowing your talents on like an end customer. And so that's been like a huge way that I've really transformed design in the way that I think about it, is like breaking it off that pedestal. And the second way is from DOEC is, I think I used to think of design as this like grand output. Like after years of work, we're now like have arrived at the perfect product that solves everyone's problems. It hits every use case. And I think DOEC really helped me challenge that, because it's all about continuous discovery, which is something that we can define as well. But designing for like starting small and starting simply and prototyping and testing and constantly kind of rediscovering what the needs are, and who else this could be used for and how it might need to be changed. And just like you're not really like reaching an endpoint, you're like consistently trying to pursue like effectiveness, like better and better results, more and more efficacy.
Okay.
There, though.
Yeah, no, that's great. So before we get to the continuous discovery part of this, I want to go back to design justice for a moment. And I'm wondering if you might be able to provide us with like an example of how that might look, or how a person might be able, this could be this could either be like designing like something for others, or maybe design, or for someone to design something for themselves using kind of principles of design justice to do that. Or maybe
Yeah,
it could be something you did, or just a random example, whatever
yeah,
you'd like.
yeah. I think it's hard to apply design justice to yourself because
Okay.
you have your lived experience, right? So technically, anything you do for yourself is like probably legit. Let's think of a good example. Well, yeah, we could think of like a really pertinent example might be designing. Actually, this is an example I just heard yesterday. So if you're trying to design a product for women who have like pelvic floor issues, and you're a group of engineers in a room trying to and this is like a physical product, right? So like a product that works to like help someone with a vagina like really be able to figure out how to solve an issue in like a product world. You might be tempted to like come at it from like an engineering perspective and be like, well, I'm an engineer, I know how to do this, I know how to design this kind of product, and I looked at the a picture of the anatomy of a vagina, and so I think I can figure this out. And this is super simplified, right? But design justice would be all about like really blowing that up, and I think the critical part of that is the designer's ability to understand how they impact the space that they're entering. Like they are just like researchers, right? Like you are not a neutral party. You don't have no impact on a context that you step into. Like you have to be reflective of like what you're bringing into the space, how you might change the energy, how like, you know, maybe being someone like entering that space as someone who doesn't have a vagina might make everyone else like answer differently, or like, you know, I'm saying the word vagina a lot on this, and I'm going to apologize.
Come
Vaginas
on.
are cool.
Yeah, and
Fine.
that's anatomy. We should, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's really about approaching things like this, like with a ton of humility and like deep curiosity, and really being aware of how your presence impacts a space, and seeing yourself as a facilitator of like helping these people get to like an outcome that really assists them in the need you're trying to solve. And really recognizing that like you don't have their lived experience, you don't have all the answers. Just because you studied it for a little while, you probably know quite a bit, but you definitely don't know what their experience is like. And so it's just like really asking a lot of questions, and really going in to and being open-minded about like your design changing, like completely changing track based on what you hear, and being really open to like how the design might manifest as you kind of go out through the process while like centering these folks' voices.
Yeah.
So
you make me think of the word of listening, how important. You haven't said the word listening, but you did say here, and you said ask lots of questions. I think listening, and you said blowing up that, because I pictured, I don't know if you used this exact word, but I pictured like a conference room with a bunch of engineers, maybe mostly male, right? And trying to figure this out. And they have like, you know, pictures of the anatomy up there and everything. So like design justice, the way you're describing it, would be a process where they are now listening and there are other people in the room. And so it's not only just asking all the good questions, but also the humility of assuming I probably don't really know how to solve this problem, but they probably do. And perhaps I can facilitate them. This phrase, Chels, that I've heard a lot, does this come from design justice? Like nothing for us without us? Is that a principle from design justice?
Definitely.
Okay.
I don't know if I can claim origin, but that's a lot lot about it. Yeah, that's exactly it.
So
well,
based on that, like
ask...
they have to be there. Go for it, Julie.
Oh, no, because well, one thing that you just said, Alma, reminded me that like it seems obvious to me that using principles of design justice will lead to probably lead to better outcomes in most situations, right? I mean, but would you also say that design justice is also being mindful about the process of design and like what the process can do to a people or to a like Alma, you also reminded me of when you talked about listening, because I forget who it was, like it was one of like a humanist psychologist, and it was a piece that we read in a different class that talked about listening not as just a passive kind of thing, but also as like almost like a real gift that you can provide to someone when you listen in a certain deep way. And I wonder if there's something about like the process itself of designing that can be more just.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think when we think about design, we should think about it in a cycle, right? And justice should be injected into every part of that cycle, into the entire process. And I think especially when you're designing for, we were talking about real challenges that people might face physically, but, even in organizations, like with a lot of us now experience work as a major part of our identity. And when something is changing, when you're designing a new solution or a new way to do something or a new organization, you're uplifting or you're uprooting the normalcy that people have at work, and maybe like the things that make them feel good and smart and capable. And so like if we think about psychologically, those processes also should be really sensitive and justice oriented towards like the experience that folks might go through when you're trying to change their work life. And I think so, yeah, you can really, and it's funny because I think that when you actually do these things, the outcomes are definitely more powerful, but you also you get a lot less resistance, because if you make space for people to actually come into the design process, to understand it and to have a role, and be able to voice their concerns and tell them like, here's how we're solving for that, or like, yeah, that's totally a valid concern. And like, still, this is really strategically important to the organization, so we have to push forward, but we we hear you. And like, that's usually what people really need, is to feel seen and heard and listened to, and like really deeply felt in their experience. And once they do that, they can kind of like be like, okay, like I can, now that I've said that, like I see where y'all are coming from, and I can get on board, and I would love to help, because like they have a ton of knowledge that they could probably bring to the process. So yeah, it has to touch every piece, and it has to be like kind of radical, and it has to be with like deep awareness from the person pushing it, whether it's design or change, which I think are really, for sure.
Nice. Julie, how do you feel about moving to continuous discovery? How did you like the design just example?
I think we're continuously discovering right now. Are we? I don't know.
That was good. That was well done.
That was a good transition.
Well, what is
so Chels, tell us about
what is continuous discovery? I mean, I understand what those words mean, I think. It's like, by the way, I saw this clip on the internet the other day, as one of oh, who's that dude? Oh man, I really can't stand him, just for the record. Jordan Peterson. Are you familiar with this guy? Do you know who that is?
Maybe. No.
Okay, it doesn't even matter. But anyway, we don't need to give him too much time. But it was like this clip where he was being interviewed or something, and he was asking a question, and he was like, well, you have to ask, what does what mean? And each word, he was like, well, you need to define what exactly exactly means, and what does mean? And and I'm like, okay, so at the risk of sounding I don't know, too postmodern or whatever the hell that is, what is continuous discovery? and how do you use it?
Yeah, and even better if you could share it like embedded within a story, that'd be lovely.
Okay.
Story time.
Yeah. Story time.
I'll start generally, and then I'll get to a story. I think so. for folks who are maybe not as familiar with like design or change, whatever, like if you're working through a cycle, usually one of the first steps in your cycle is discovery. It's like you're trying to, maybe someone came to you with a problem that they need solved, or like a business challenge. And the first thing you want to do is gather as much information as possible about like the topic, just so you can understand it. And so that's kind of what discovery means, like in that world, I think. And the continuous aspect is all about like resisting the perfection that I think is also tied to like the eliteness that we hold design at. And so continuous discovery is all about like recognizing that, if we resist perfection and actually just start trying things and testing and prototyping to solve a problem, that, we'll come up with something that, works or doesn't, or needs to get better. But if you have something to play with, you can then move on to of trying to tweak it as you learn more and more information. So it's about pretending as if like learning doesn't stop. Like if you're trying to like make something better in any context, your learning is like lifelong. And so the idea is like, if you build something tangible or not, and you're trying to like have the outcome that you want, that like in our continuous changing world, in like the very emergence space of organizational context, that like there will always be new information that could help it get better, that might make it need to change, that you might need to take it and fit it into a different space within the organization, and what would that look like. And so it's about resisting perfection from that like grand reveal of a product, and instead like showing it to people and being like, hey, what do you think about this, and like, does this work? And I can embed that in an example.
Before you do, I really want to interrupt you, because one, I think it's fascinating the framing that you took to continuous discovery. So as I said, we haven't really talked about this, the two of us. And I actually would not have thought about the perfectionism, like rejecting perfectionism as a framing. And I really, really appreciate that, because it is there. Yes, a continuous discovery is about, like, we're not going to get to a grand reveal. I love that. I really think that is a gem of a lot of the things, a lot of the gems that you've already said today and given us today. But the other thing that I think is interesting, going back to something that you said very at the beginning, when we were talking just about change in general and how you described, how you define change, is that change is happening constantly, right? And I think something beautiful about continuous discovery is also assuming that your customers or the people that you're working with and trying to, come up with a co-create a solution, that they are also changing, that their opinions could change, that they could have needed this one thing first. No, first they needed a blue mouse, and now they really need a red mouse, or whatever it is, right? So I think that it's rejecting perfectionism, and it's also understanding that model of the 2 year, I think those were your words, like the 2 or 3 year grand reveal of this thing that's going to solve everyone's problems, is an old model that doesn't work with our reality, which is constantly changing. And so sometimes our needs are constantly changing. And if our needs are constantly changing, well, then that's definitely the case for our customers or our clients or our users or whoever we're trying to serve. Right.
That's exactly right.
So that was fantastic. Anyways, okay, your story.
Yeah. Because if discovery stops, and then you go behind closed doors and you create a product, and you're like, this is perfect, it matches all of my discovery perfectly, and then you reveal it, it'll no longer be perfect because everything will have changed. And you would have known that had you been continuous about your discovery.
Yes. This is why it is mind-blowing. This is why it is.
I know.
Well,
I know.
It changes everything. Okay.
Yeah. And I can talk about a specific work example and a story. Is it a good time to go into that?
Please. We always, it's always a good time for story time.
Okay, cool.
Right.
So
now,
I mean, this is a really simple story, but it's one that's top of mind for me right now. So as we said, like, I'm a consultant. I'm working with an organization that's in like the energy utility space, and I'm working on like a small team within like that larger organization, and they have this this source of data that's like a little bit undertapped for them. And the team I was working with like really needed to understand this one metric. It like is very important for like the outcomes of their team. And so I was like, what about this data source? Like, I feel like it was built for something else, but it could be used for this. Like, do we want to try it? And we needed to see like day over day trends of like specific metrics. And so what I did was I worked with like my internal Propeller folks, because like I'm really good at defining like the business needs and trying to understand how to utilize metrics, but I'm not like an Excel whiz. I can't like build, or like a BI whiz. So I kind of
sorry, VI?
BI, business intelligence, like dashboards and like big query of.
We don't know about this yet.
Yeah, I'm not one of those either.
That's fair enough. It's just like people are really good at taking like huge swaths of data and like making a dashboard.
Cool.
So
those people.
Yeah, exactly. And so I mentioned the perfection thing because that's something that I've really had to work on. Is like that was kind of an old way of me functioning. Is like I had that draw to like produce something perfect and have it work perfectly and perfectly match needs, like pre like MSLSC. And I think the program helped me so much because it made me think of like kind of completely break that down. And in this example, I might have like wanted to create this huge massive thing that was really like polished, and instead I just like turned internally and I was like, hey, like here's some data, here's what all the data like means and how we might want to visualize it. And I just had someone build me like a really pretty like pivot Excel table that we, there were slicers and we could like see different data and different days. And so then I took that to that team and I was like, hey, does this like meet the need? Like, does it answer the questions you're trying to answer? And what was great about that is I got a tool in people's hands like right away that they could use. It's not super fancy. It's we like right now I'm in the process of my continuous discovery with that team to say like, how would this need to change to meet more use cases or to better meet like our core use case, like using this metric every day and see how it's changing. And as I'm doing that, I'm also going to different lines of businesses within the organization who I think are like could use this metric maybe. And I'm going to them and I'm showing them this like super simple Excel. And I'm like, hey, like, is this like, would you guys solve any of your challenges like using these metrics? And they're like, oh, like we actually look at this forward looking instead of historical. So we just have conversations about like, how it might be useful, but how it might be useful to see it in a different way or to use it as like a predictive tool. And so I gather those requirements and then I like go back and I'm like talking to my data folks and I'm like, can we tweak it this way? Can we tweak it that way? Can we make a different one that might meet those needs? And I'm going to continue that process with other teams. And the idea and the beauty of this is that, first of all, there's a product in hand, like right away, that needs. It's not like, super astounding. It's not this like really complex dashboard. It's just super simple. And it's meeting needs. And then like, I'm just going to continue to try and evolve it. And like the organization is changing too. And like, so even my core team's needs are going to change in the next 6 months. So I'm like, okay, well, let's like keep that in mind. And like, as that changes, like, let's revisit this and like continue to like discover more about like, okay, now our context has kind of shifted or like whatever it is. And like, is this still useful? How can we change it? And so that's like a simple one that I think is really applicable for me right now.
That's awesome. I have a couple of questions. Like, how do you balance working in this wonderful way with the expectation from a client standpoint of like, we're hiring this consultant, they should just tell us what we want to know, kind of thing. Like, do you ever use the term continuous discovery? Like, hey, here's the method. Like, do you put your cards on the table, or is this kind of just?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question.
Yeah.
I don't use that phrase with them. I think what I try and bring us back to is our core need. And if someone were to say like, I need this metric to try and solve this problem, and I want it in this beautiful, robust dashboard that has these 18 other metrics. A lot of my work is like questioning, like softly, right? I'm not trying to like power trip anyone, but if I'm like, yeah, so like, tell me more, like, why would we need those? Like, what's important about those other metrics?
Nice.
Or like, do you think like, are they all like, what, if you had to pick a priority metric, like which one would it be? Like, you know, let's assume that we can't do all of them at once. Like tomorrow, what do you need tomorrow in your inbox? They're like, well, I could really use this. I'm like, great, let's start there. So I think it's like really helping other people question their own assumptions or their own attachments to perfection or their own attachments to this like grand reveal. And it's like, what do we like just asking the question, like, what are we solving by waiting 6 months and revealing all 18 metrics at once? Like, and then being like, oh yeah, I mean, will it be really helpful for this metric next week? And then the other ones become really helpful in Q1. I'm like, all right, let's like prioritize, like, let's like break it down into smaller chunks.
Genius. So genius. So genius. Those are very practical.
It's kind of inception-y, right? Like we're trying, like, I'm just asking questions. It's all their ideas, right? And it's that I'm helping them kind of surface what's underneath a lot of those ideas, rather than just saying yes.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't ask you this before, but I'm curious, and maybe understanding a little bit about like how you came to this work and like how you came to doing a master's in learning and organizational change. Will give us some context, because there are also times that I'm listening to you and I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, like, how does Chels know all this stuff? Like, I'm in this program. I know, like, I feel like I know some stuff, but like, that's friggin' awesome. Like, you know, and I mean, you know, all the power to you. I mean, it's awesome. But like, there's also part of me that's thinking like, even if I knew something, like, I don't know, like, would I have the confidence right now to go to a client and be like, so tell me more why you need it? I don't know. I'm not sure. And I'm wondering if you could share with us a little bit about like how you came to this work, and is that scary at all, or is that very comfortable for you?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I came to this work. So I spent close to a decade in climate change, which I plan to probably go back to eventually. But yeah, I'm someone who
what does that mean in climate change?
So I was in like renewable, like solar and storage. So I guess like I've identified as being part of like the climate change fight, like trying to fight.
Yeah, not changing the climate. We don't want climate change.
Avoiding that.
Avoiding.
Yeah.
To be clear.
Unless Elon wants me to do some terraforming on Mars or something, I'll totally jump on that.
Then, you know, there's always exceptions.
I left him a voicemail. He's getting back to me.
I have no doubt. Did you buy one of those, what is it, burnt hair perfume while you were at it?
Why don't I get it?
Oh, this is Elon Musk's latest. He has a line of perfume called burnt hair.
Ew. Oh.
That's the most Elon thing I've heard all day. Wow.
All week.
Now I know my next career move for sure.
Tell us, what would be your perfume, the first perfume that you release with your perfume line?
Wet dog. It smells amazing. It'd be your pheromones, you know, it would just, yeah, it'd be nice. Anyway.
Okay, so yeah, you spent 10 years
back to the question.
Fighting climate change, pretty much, working in renewable energy, etc.
Yeah, so I was at the same organization and I love change. I held all sorts of roles for them that I like was fascinated by, and my last role there I like really loved. I was on kind of a startup team within the organization, and I was kind of consulting for them. I was trying to help them like kind of prop up and get established, but they were trying to basically change the way that our electric grid like sources power in like high demand times, and I don't need to go more into that, but essentially I was really engaged. I loved it. I felt like I was really I felt like I was fighting for something I really cared about. I've always been like a big environmentalist, And like this string of events happened towards the end of my time there, where I kind of like realized that there was like organizational changes that weren't necessarily executed very, very well. Like there was a lack of transparency around like a lot of the things that were happening. I kind of became aware of like a lot of the politics that were happening. We had become like really big, a lot bigger than when I started. And so I think a lot of growing pains. But I kind of just had this moment where I was like, shit, I could have spent like almost 8 years at this company, and maybe I actually haven't made that big. Like, has the company actually made that big of a difference? Like, we have like really good metrics, like, you know, whatever. But I was thinking about how important it is for organizations themselves to be really thoughtful in the way that they like function. Not only to achieve their strategic desires, but for their employees. Like organizations are just clusters of people all working on something, right? And so when I saw these activities that weren't necessarily like taking into account the experience of their employees, I was just like, wow, we could have like a perfect idea and like a really good business model and still like completely flunk if the people at the top or the people who would have power like don't really consider their employees. And I kind of had like a crisis around it with my work there, because I was like, whoa, like, are we actually as effective as I think? Like, am I ever actually going to be like promoted in the way that I want to? Like, do I actually have the growth I want to here? And so that made me just like kind of lift my head up. And because I love change, I was like, I really want to help organizations be better at this. And I don't necessarily want to focus on like just climate change or just renewable energy. I want something that I could take and apply to like any organizational context in any industry, to help them just be more effective by like thinking about their people. So that's how I got to MSLSC.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
No, that's really awesome. I was curious because you talked about being an environmentalist and such, and I don't know the nature of the client that you were referencing before, but you talked about them being in the energy space. I don't know if they're in the renewable energy space, but if they're not, is that a difficulty for you, or are you also just more of a realist of like, hey, this is the world, and we'll try to do good?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's actually something I've really struggled with entering consulting, because I felt like I might come in and have like very little control over who I was helping, because you know that's what consultants are doing, right? Is what outcomes would I be enabling for organizations that I might not work for if I were just like going after a job, right? And so I had to do a lot of reflection on that, and I think it came down to like, stop me if I go on a tangent here, but I think that
Please.
Our culture has become pretty obsessed with like binary interpretations of choices that we make in our life, like around like cancel culture. There's this like belief that like one bad choice and like you're ruined, there's no redemption. You know, it's super like binary. You're either making the right choice or the wrong choice. And I really try and resist that in like my day-to-day life. And I've had to do like particular work around it with my profession, because I think that it's really easy to like, I could have kept working for that renewable company and kept like posturing in my community and be like, I'm making a difference. Like I'm in renewable energy, like this is what we're doing. But in reality, like I was like, if I step away from this and spend like 5 years consulting and gain the skill sets that I think I can get from that space, even if I'm working for a client that I like might not be aligned with, could I jump back into a context I've been really passionate about and be like 20 times more effective than if I had just stayed and like continued to like move up? And that's how, so I really like tried to push myself to question, like, would I stay in renewable energy because I like how it feels on me? Or am I gaining the skills that I think will be really effective for me in 5 or 10 years or for the industry? Or just like really trying to question my motives. And so now that I'm in consulting, it's all about learning, right? I'm like here to like rapidly learn. I'm here to experiment. I'm here to really push myself. And I'm aligned with the organization I'm working with now, my client. But you know, in the next little bit, I could not be. So and I think there's that balance of like, maybe I would define it as like being a little selfish and saying like, I have an incredible opportunity to gain like a really incredible skill set in a short amount of time, even though I'm enabling this outcome, that then I can go back and apply to a space I really like and potentially be like severely more effective than if I had just like continued to like grip my ego that was attached to like being in.
I love the way you think, Chels, and I appreciate so much the coherency, because right now you're giving us an example of how you question yourself and your own motives, right? And you question, and before you had talked about how you, like in the context of continuous discovery, that you do that with a client, an internal client, in a kind and careful way, like the example of, okay, so you need 18 metrics. What's the first one? And what about this one? And so there's so much coherency because you're a person who is willing to question yourself first. And so maybe going back to Tuli, your question about like, would I have the confidence, you know, that you're impressed by that confidence of being able to question kindly. I think kind is an important word in continuous discovery. We haven't really used that, but it is important. Right? It can't just be questioning to question, because but from very much of a like, I want to co-create, I want solutions. And I think that an iterative kind of little by little process will be one of the best ways to do it. So going back to the confidence, I think that, Chelsea, a lot of it comes from the fact that you are willing to question yourself, and then that, you know, that coherency could give you more confidence to be able to do it with clients. So that's, I mean, I'm just putting that out there. You don't have to comment on that, but it's like as a takeaway, even for myself, I think that is fantastic. And if I could, I have one, I don't know, Julie, if you have other questions that you had written down. I have one that might be quick. Something
Go for
important.
It. What do you mean?
Okay, cool. No, I wasn't sure if you had finished.
I have lots of different points to go, and we probably have to end at some point, but let's, go ahead, please.
Okay, so in continuous discovery, there's a word you have mentioned a few times, which is outcome. And I'm familiar with that, and maybe lots of people are, but I don't know if we're all defining it the same way. What does it mean, right? What does outcome mean? So one of the things that I learned in
wait, one second, I'm sorry to stop you, but outcome, not just like the outcome of a process, not just like the ending.
Exactly. That's the thing I want to talk about. Exactly.
Okay.
So outcome has been used a few times, and I don't think we've stopped to talk about it, because in continuous discovery and kind of design thinking, one of the biggest shifts, mindset shifts that I think the method invites you to take on is to switch from like an output of a process. So like let's use your example. And if you have another example, that's great. The example of the 18 metrics on the really beautiful dashboard, that's an output, right? And continuous discovery is like, well, even more than output, we're actually more concerned about outcome. So they sound like very similar words, and it took me a while to get it. How have you wrestled with this, and how could you share the difference between output and outcome, and why that matters?
Yeah, I'm going to use a different example because I think it resonates with folks. Is like, if you're a company who's taking on like a DEI strategy,
so like diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes, thanks, Tuli. And you could say like, you know, an output of a DEI engagement might be, we want 300 employees to complete training, you know, and the training content could be about like how to be more inclusive in the workplace. Your output would be like, well, 300 people, like success means that 300 people took this training. And that's that's an output. And like, we could question, like, what have we actually accomplished by 300 people taking that training? The outcome in that same scenario would be, we want our employees to be more inclusive in the workplace. And that's a very different thing to measure, right? Because you'd have to like define what you mean, what metrics you'd mean by actually being inclusive in the workplace. But by setting that as the outcome, especially at the beginning of the process, an output with the 300 people completing a training, you would like design like how you'd get there, right? Like you'd bring someone in that does the training, you get 300 people to sign up, and like you check that box. But if it's an outcome, like it leaves you very open to like how you actually get to that outcome. An output of 300 people completing a training is really straightforward. It doesn't leave a lot of flexibility or creativity in the process to get there. And you probably haven't accomplished, like we could argue that you haven't really accomplished a lot at the end. But an outcome like says like, here's where we want to get, and we don't really know how do you get more people to be more inclusive, to have to be different in the workplace, and act in more inclusive ways. And then you can take all sorts of trajectories to try and reach that outcome, like multiple, but it allows you to really bring in like design thinking and creativity and figure out how to actually get to this outcome that actually changes the DEI like at your organization. Yeah, I hope that wasn't talking, but
no, that was a fantastic example. How have you wrestled with outcome versus out? Because I don't think it's a surprise that in most organizations, right, output mentality is just a big thing, because people are measured, and sometimes the way that companies are set up is they want to have little boxes. It makes it neater.
Performance.
Yes, performance metric, which we clearly have feelings about. But how do you wrestle with that and help even your internal clients or colleagues adopt more of an outcome mindset?
Yeah, I think this is particularly challenging in consulting because a lot of us are measured by how many deliverables we made, right? It's like, I made this deck, I made this Excel, I made this XYZ. And that's like a maybe a problem with the industry generally, and beyond consulting too, is like that we're kind of obsessed with like tangible things that we can look at and point to and say, like, I spent a lot of time, and you're always trying to kind of prove that you did something. And like proof can really be in something tangible where you can point to it and you're like, oh, I made this, and like that's what you wanted. But I think for me, like what I try to really question is, I show up to work every day because I have a deep curiosity and passion to actually, I'm very long-term minded. Like I just think in really long timelines. And so I think about like, how can I show up in this space to actually help this organization achieve its like strategic vision or the things that they care about. And a lot of that takes like resisting my own personal ego to be able to just have something tangible that I can point to in my next salary conversation and be like, well, I made this and like I deserve a raise. And it's really about resisting like the fulfillment of your own ego in these spaces, resisting which is very difficult, the pressure from everyone else to produce deliverables.
Real.
And instead focus on like, okay, and you really have to be confident in like where you sit, and you're like, okay, I think that if we actually focused on an outcome, like we could like really make a difference here. And trying to like instill that in your people. And I think it's all about like the way that you talk about this stuff, and the way that you ask questions and like gently challenge assumptions. And just that's kind of like the slow way of moving the needle. Is it's like, and even like talking about my own stuff, like I'll make a deliverable where I'm like, this is kind of trash. Like, I don't think this was effective at all. Like maybe I got caught up in like a deadline or like that consultant mentality where it's like, I want to point to something. And I might call that out to my client and be like, I actually think this wasn't very effective, and like that's on me, and I need to do like, here's how I think I would do it differently. And like clients really respond to that because like they feel the authenticity, they feel like the desire for me, like I am there to serve their long-term outcomes, and I'm going to help them resist their own worst enemies, like in that process of trying to get there. And I think like I don't tell them that necessarily, but I try and show it to them in the way that I take up space, the way that I plan projects, the questions that I ask, the accountability I hold myself to. And I think it's just about like they feel that from how I'm taking up space.
Can you tell your wife that I want to marry you? Oh. So brilliant.
Here, put your finger out. I can
you just captured that was so, oh, there it is. All right.
I I wonder, so three kind of big concepts that you talked about, and maybe there are more, but continuous discovery. Well, first there was design justice, continuous discovery, and now this idea of like being more outcome oriented as opposed to output oriented, or maybe not even worrying too. I don't. Well, yeah, meaning being cautious about output mentality. Maybe I'd put it that way. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about recently is, a culture in an organization. And I'm curious if you have any ideas of how to instill these ideas into the culture of an organization. Continuous discovery, outcome, or be more outcome oriented, and be justice oriented, or have an orientation toward designing for justice.
Yeah, I mean, I think it, like a lot of things in culture, it comes from leadership.
Totally.
Being able to kind of live those methods or values. And like one of the key things about being able to resist output mentality is the ability to say when you like failed at something, or when we failed at something, and to like acknowledge that as like a massive learning opportunity, because that's what the continuous discovery is, like one of the core tenets, right? Is like you're going to test and you're trying to like figure out how to make it work, and that might result in like several failures or like partial failures.
Totally.
Like that is an incredible source of feedback, and that's how you get, that's the entire way you get better, right? Is that you're not going to produce the perfect thing on the first try, because first of all that doesn't exist, but also because everything's changing all the time. So if you kind of approach it with this like, we're just going to constantly learn via like kind of getting it wrong and getting it right, and seeing what's working. And I think the ability to approach something with an outcome mindset is to have a general culture of being excited about failing, and resisting blame, and resisting that like kind of like, I think that cultures that are focused on output are cultures that are focused on performance, and being able to prove that you did something, and prove that you did it right, and prove that you're trying, and you're trying to do something. And it's kind of this like scarcity mindset. It's like, I need to prove what I did, rather than like what I would call like an abundance mindset, which is like everything is possible. We're going to fail a bunch, and like, let's go through this journey together. And like, when something goes wrong, we're not going to look for someone to fail or someone to blame. We're going to look for like the steps, like, is it positive inquiry? Which
appreciative inquiry. We're going to find what worked. We're
going to find what worked. And like, so I think that starts at the top. And I think that people who are confident can, like, in their own like approach to this, can have that side to side impact on culture, like the lateral rather than the top down. But I really do think that like the top has to be able to exhibit that in order for anyone else to feel safe embracing it.
You're pretty much confirming at least my current understanding, which is that like psychological safety is first, everything else is commentary. Really, so like the idea in an organization is to do things that create psychological safety, which means that people feel okay to mess up, and to fail, and I like, in my mind as you were speaking, I was hearing someone, some voice of lots of people I know who might be skeptical and be like, okay, but like, we just got to get our shit done, and we got to make our money, or whatever they might say. And I wish that those people knew, is that with a process that involves continuous discovery, and that focuses on design justice, and that focuses on outcomes and not on outputs, first of all, you're going to just have a better life. Like your life's going to be better. Like you're just going to have a better life. And I mean, hopefully our lives are very long, but we have one of them, and, but second, I mean, I can't prove this, but I think it's really likely that actually you're going to end up doing like really well, maybe even better,
Definitely better.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
right, exactly, right? Like this is where people don't understand, like, yeah, like it's going to be great.
Yeah, it's so funny because it's like the gripping to like blame and to fear and to outputs is like completely contradictory to actually achieve, because I know the exact retorts you're talking about. It's like, we don't have space for that. Like we have stuff to get done. And it's like, the stuff you're producing is trash, and it's going to take you 3 times as long to get to the power of a solution that you could get to through open conversation, for someone to actually raise their hand, like, hey, I actually think I made an error in this spot. Like, let's investigate what happened before and after and see if that led to like the failure. And like, but if everyone's too freaking afraid to like speak up, then like you're never gonna find it, or it's gonna take forever, or you're just gonna keep producing trash because no one's like speaking up. So yeah, it's really funny. It's a total contradiction.
Yeah, it's actually cheaper to practice these principles because the other way around takes more time. In the best case scenarios, in the worst case scenarios, it's just continuous failure and unhappiness. But great question.
I have so many more questions, but I feel like this is such a good place to probably end. I don't know, right?
Yeah.
Well, we'll bring you on for a part 2. Seriously, please.
That'd be
If you're willing, we would love to have you. I can speak for Alma and myself.
Yes, you definitely can. Yeah. So many gems. But we would before we let you go, of course, if there's anything that we didn't get to ask you that you would like to share, go for it. And then we have a few questions. Quick one.
Okay. I think, well, thank you. I definitely would love a part 2. That sounds so fun.
Amazing.
And no, I think we hit all the big things that I wanted to talk about. So
are you plugging anything? Any podcast? Are you selling merch? You got any podcasts?
Yes, wet dog perfume.
Oh, it's so terrible.
I'll plug Propeller. I'll plug my firm.
There you go.
I was nervous about going into consulting because of the reputation that surrounds it, and Propeller has just like completely lived their values, and like they practice what they preach. The C team is like incredible. We have really interesting open conversations about like all sorts of stuff. They're just like, it reminds me a lot of our MSLOC community. Just everyone's there to learn and to help each other, and there's a lot of like uplifting. Cool. So it's just an incredible firm if you're looking for a place to work or for some work to get done.
It'd be cool to hear how, if you know those stories, obviously not today, but like going back to Tuli's questions about culture, like what that leadership team did, how they designed from the get-go to create that type of an environment and culture. That's fascinating. I'll look into it.
That's very cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, I love them.
Okay. Tuli, do you have any surprise questions for Chels?
Oh, like we were thinking about doing like some rapid fires at the end, like rapid fire questions, but I don't remember any of the ones that we talked about. I honestly don't. Because I'm still focused on our conversation. I'm like, oh, there was like this philosophical question I wanted to ask Chels at some point, and I have other things to ask. So I don't even.
I know. I get it. It was an engrossing conversation. I only have one thing present, so I guess it won't be a lightning round unless you think of some others. Chels, I remember a conversation with you walking through the streets of Berkeley, where you made a funny confession about your resume, your CV, and a funny little thing that you put at the bottom of it, like in personal interests.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about that?
Yeah. I have an uncanny ability to guess the right Allen wrench size.
Okay, what is that?
I wish I had one on my desk. And Allen wrenches are, I think they're like
Allen wrenches.
Yeah. Okay. And there's just like, a lot of bike pieces have like little hexagon, or Allen wrench like screws, and they're always all different sizes on all sorts of things. You have an Allen wrench key that has all the different sizes on it. And I can like look at one and guess like which one on my key is gonna fit it. And it's like a super gay talent, I think, like the biggest lesbian thing in the world. And I had it on my CV for, I think it's still there. I think I got my current job with it. So
Okay, wait, that's amazing. Wait, do you mean it? Like did the person reading your resume be like, whoa, that like, okay, like I have a million questions. Are you putting it on there because it's
why?
awesome, like it's a random talent, or is it also code for like, I'm gay? Can you read between the lines?
I think it's both those things, but I also think the biggest thing is CVs are like can be so boring.
Oh my God.
And when I have been looking to hire someone, when I see someone like have a little bit of levity on there, especially in that bottom part, because it's a free for all. Like if you're just like interests, like camping, you know, like if you're just like naming random things, like it's just like I love when someone just like drops some like dry humor in there or something kind of funny or quirky. So like I'm always looking for that, and I just think I love any levity that kind of breaks up like the seriousness of the structure. It's scary though. It's scary to submit a CV with that on it because people might be like, this person is, which is also a cool like mechanism for me too. Because if someone like is like, this person isn't serious enough or like they're not perfect enough, I'm like, great. I probably don't want
to work for you.
Yeah.
What a great filter.
Right, exactly. So it works both ways, I think.
That's fantastic.
I don't think what to put on mine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Chels. This has been awesome, and excited for part 2.
Yeah, this is good. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so
excited.
Thank
you, Chels. It was great.
Yeah.
So many nuggets.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Take care.
All right, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.